Good morning. Welcome to the King's Report News Hour for the 11th day in the 8th month of the 16th year of Changi by the heavenly calendar. Timos is sitting in for the second king of Cheongji Moon. Let's take our tour around the kingdom. And right now in Chongpyeong, Tennessee, 61 degrees and clear. Areas of fog this morning, otherwise mostly sunny, high of 78 today. Tonight, clear and partly cloudy, low of 51. And in father's hometown, Jeongju, North Pyongan province in Korea, what is today North Korea, it's 65 and mostly clear right now, 56 for a low tonight. Tomorrow, sunny to partly cloudy, very warm, less humid, 80 degrees. My goodness, yes, very, very warm. Compared to the Cheonrygung Palace, where it's 37 degrees right now. My goodness, winter is not far away. 37 degrees and clear. Brilliant sunshine this morning, sun and areas of high clouds this afternoon, a high of 67. Definitely they're in the late autumn, aren't they? Okay, partly cloudy, a jacket may come in handy, low of 41 degrees tonight. And then at the Liberty Rock RV Park and Campground in Limestone County, Texas, clear and 64 degrees now and very warm today, plenty of sunshine, high of 93, tonight clear and low of 66. At the Suncheon Palace in Korea, 65 and cloudy, low of 63 tonight, cloudy and brief evening shower or two, followed by a couple of soaking showers late. Tomorrow, high of 69, so not much chance of not much change in temperature over the next 24 hours, it seems. Drenching rain in the morning, cloudy and not as warm, but humid. And at the Gunma Palaces in Japan, currently 75 and partly cloudy. Increased clouds tonight, low of 60. Tomorrow, mostly cloudy, high of 76. And then in Ilan, Taiwan, currently 84. Clear skies, low of 74 tonight, continued clear skies. Tomorrow, hot with sizzling sunshine, high of 95. Yes, we are in the tropics, that's for sure. Okay. All right, and let's go to Father's Word. Where are we today? We are in the chapter on, or the book of True God, the True God book, and the first chapter of that book, but in section 5. May 9th, 1988. God is all-knowing and all-powerful, so why does he need strength? He is the subject partner that moves the universe. Isn't that right? He is the great king of strength, or him is power, strength, all that kind of stuff. So he is the great king of power or strength. So he does not need strength or power. So no matter how many, or no matter how much a sort of great hero in history, great strong person in history may have boasted of his strength, um, all the kings that governed the great countries of history, all those kings have all passed away, but they are all people who danced beneath the authority of God. In other words, they danced. In other words, they lived where dancing here, of course, is figuratively. God does not need money or knowledge, all those things that we humans feel that we need. So God does not need any of those things. Of course, he does not, in this particular paragraph, go on to say, well, then what does he need? But we know the answer, right? We know the answer. Love. We know the answer. Yes, he needs love because although he is love, and love is the core of his 심정, and love flows from his 심정, but he cannot experience love without a object partner. And he can only experience love to the extent that the object partner itself is capable of receiving love and returning beauty to him. And this, by the way, is why Hak Jahan had to go through the growing period, right? In 1960, she started out at the formation level. And then in 2003, she was blessed again to father at the growth stage level in 2003. And she was to have been blessed with him again in 2010, according to Yu Jung Wook, Reverend Yu Jung Wook, who does the OSTP lectures authorized by father. Uh, and 2010, but didn't qualify. And eventually that happened in 2017. What was the solar date in 2017? Do you remember? It was 9/23, 2017. What was the solar date that Hak Jahan was officially incarcerated in South Korea? 9/23, 2025. I'm not saying anything. Hey, listen, I'm not the numbers guy, all right? Father is the numbers guy. That's his that's his specialty. But I'm just saying, that True Mother was blessed to father 9/23, 2017 by the solar calendar, right? But not but and father always goes by the heavenly calendar. So by the heavenly calendar, it's not doesn't quite work out. But by the solar calendar, it's exact 9/23, 2017. And then Hak Jahan is jailed in South Korea officially in 9/23, 2025. Just saying. I don't know what that means or if it means anything at all. I mean, so I'm sure someone will play with that and come up with something. But listen, I leave the numbers up to Father. I'm I have no idea whether it means anything. Okay. So speaking of Hak Jahan, um, so yes, yesterday there was this hearing in the court as to to consider the Hak Jahan's lawyer's motion that the incarceration was unwarranted or inappropriate, and the court considered that motion. And actually, the hearing lasted for 4 hours. And at the end of the hearing, she was given 3 minutes to speak on her own behalf. Sometimes it's not wise to accept those offers. So she gets up, and according to the media, she says, that uh, how can you treat the mother of peace this way, right? And she said she's ashamed for Korean democracy because of the way that she has been treated. So, you know, and also she said, well, that for the sake of peace, uh, all countries need to attend or worship heaven. These are not things that probably helped her case. Uh, anyway, so the court rejected the motion, and so she is tonight in jail. And uh, most likely she's in jail for a considerable period, at least until the indictment. The reason that the prosecution is giving for the jailing is that they say that she may destroy evidence or tamper with evidence, and they want to prevent that. But uh, and also they're saying that they need access to her because the investigation is ongoing. When it comes to the time of the indictment, then when the indictment is handed down, it's possible that the court may say, okay, well, you've got apparently you have all the evidence because now you've put together a case that you've submitted to the court. So perhaps there's a possibility that she'll be released then, pending her trial. But it's I don't know. The former president Yoon tried to get released also today. Um, he's in his trial stage now. He's already been indicted, and the trial is ongoing. And the court reviews that, saying that no, you're going to stay in jail during the trial. You're going to stay in jail during the trial. And in Korea, apparently, they can do that. So anyway, it's possible that Hak Jahan will stay in jail for a very considerable period of time. But we'll have to see how it all works out. So anyway, tonight she is in her 72 square foot jail cell. Um, but hey, she's got her own TV, so can't complain, I would say. Well, I don't know how many channels she gets. I don't know at all. Most likely, she's not getting cable. Anyway, so let's go to this story that I mentioned yesterday, and so that I was going to cover today. And that is that yesterday that is October 1st, was uh, uh, the anniversary of the founding of the Korean Army, of the Republic of Korea Army. And it's a national holiday, and there's always a big ceremony, and always the president gives a speech. And Lee Jae-myung also gave a speech. So, but I think we need to take a look at just exactly what he said, because I think there's some meaning here that we need to pay attention to. President Lee Jae-myung on Wednesday pledged to build a strong, self-reliant military force to actively cope with the changing security landscape, expressing his confidence in South Korea's military power and defense industry. Okay, so what he's saying here, in my opinion, in my analysis, right? My analysis is what he's saying here is um, let's make a military that is strong enough to defend our country, defend our own country without the help of the United States, so that we can ask the United States or tell the United States military to leave the Korean Peninsula. In my mind, that's what he's saying. Okay, that's what he means by a strong, self-reliant military force. And also when he says the changing security landscape, what does that mean? Um, how is the security landscape changing? I think that he would say, if he were, given a few beers and a truth serum or something like that, he would say, "Well, I don't believe this. I don't believe North Korea is going to attack us. I don't believe that." And so we really don't need that strong of a military anyway in order to defend ourselves against North Korea. And if the U.S. is staying in Korea for the sake of projecting power against the CCP and communist China, then we don't want that. We don't want such a foreign military, to be on our soil, because we want to have friendly relations with communist China. After all, they are our biggest trading partner. We depend on them to send us lots of tourists who will come here and spend lots of money, and that's actually becoming a big part of our economy. So we want the U.S. military to leave for those reasons. Number one, we've come to the point in the future, not now, but in the future, we'll come to the point where we can say, okay, our military is strong enough to defend ourselves against North Korea. Number two, we're not interested in defending ourselves against China or Russia, because they are both very nice, nice, nice countries. Now, I want to. I was looking around, and I found this document just a few minutes ago. Consequences of U.S. troop withdrawal from Korea in spring 1949. Now, this, of course, is widely known among people who study or care about the Korean Peninsula as being a huge mistake by the United States. All right, because the U.S. did withdraw in June 1949, and of course, guess what happened? Uh, North Korea attacked in June 1950, and very nearly united the peninsula under communism. So here, let's take a look at this. Let's get to the summary here. Okay. Withdrawal of U.S. forces from Korea in the spring of 1949 would probably in time be followed by an invasion, timed to coincide with communist-led South Korean revolts by the North Korean People's Army, possibly assisted by small battle-trained units from communist Manchuria. Battle-trained meaning that they were part of the Chinese Civil War, and fighting with the communists against the nationalists, Chiang Kai-shek, and also prior to that, fighting with the communists against the Japanese imperial forces. So these battle-tested units or forces were given by China to North Korea as they were establishing their military. Whereas the South Korean military really did not have that kind of battle experience at that time. And, and also, just sort of a side note, the U.S. said, you know what, we're going to give aid to South Korea, but the terrain in South Korea is not conducive to tank battles. So therefore, we're not going to give South Korea any tanks or anti-tank weapons because it's not possible for North Korea to attack. Even if they should attack, they will not attack with tanks. Well, guess what? When the invasion came, it was led by tanks. So U.S. was pretty naive. Uh, and anyway, yeah. When it comes to this Korean Peninsula, U.S. has made a lot of mistakes, and this was certainly one of them, or a couple of them. Yeah. All right. Although it can be presumed that South Korean security forces will eventually develop sufficient strength to resist such an invasion, they will not have achieved that capability by the spring of 1949. It is unlikely that such strength will be achieved before January 1950, or even then, right, as it turned out. Assuming that Korean communists would make aggressive use of the opportunity presented to them, which they did, U.S. troop withdrawal would probably result in a collapse of the U.S.-supported Republic of Korea, an event which would seriously diminish U.S. prestige and adversely affect U.S. security interests in the Far East. And this very nearly happened, right? The South Korean forces were pushed down, even though they had initial support from some of the U.S. military. Still, they were all pushed down into a southeastern corner of the Korean Peninsula around Pusan. It was called the Pusan Perimeter. And they held there until General MacArthur was able to make an in-run to the Incheon area and sort of invade through Incheon, cut off the supply lines of the North Koreans, and he tried to trap them. He tried to cut all the way across the peninsula in order to trap the North Korean forces, but he was not able to do that. That did not succeed, and so they were able to escape to the north. But anyway, all that is, of course, history. So right now, Lee Jae-myung has in the past described the U.S. military in South Korea as an occupying force. Now, technically, legally, that is not actually true, but it will become true if and when the South Korean government officially asks the U.S. to leave, which the Philippines did in 1991. And I have some information about that on my cell phone. So here, this is from something called CQ Almanac. U.S. military told to leave Philippines. An article from CQ Almanac 1991. A series of international and domestic events ranging from a natural disaster to the breakup of the Soviet Union turned 1991 into a turning point for relations between the United States and the Philippines. The culmination came December 27, when the government of President Corazon C. Aquino told U.S. troops to leave the country. The decision signaled an end to the vast U.S. military presence in the area, a presence that dated back to 1898, when control of the islands was wrested from the Spanish. It wasn't really wrested. I mean, U.S. just basically showed up and the Spanish left. Anyway, the Philippines gained independence from the United States in 1946, although the bases continued to play a principal role for the U.S. Armed Forces in the Pacific Theater for decades afterward. Okay, so in this case, I read a little bit, and the Philippines was actually asking U.S. for money in return for allowing the U.S. bases to remain. I'm sorry. allowing the U.S. bases to remain. And there was some, disagreement over money, also disagreement over how long the treaty would go. In the case of Korea, the U.S. is receiving money from South Korea for the price of maintaining bases on the peninsula. So it's opposite from the case of the Philippines in that sense. And there's always this amount is renegotiated every few years, and there's always disagreement, of course, and negotiation, of course. And so there's been a lot of talk over the years, actually, about South Korean military becoming self-reliant. And in principle, I think it is a good idea. In principle, uh, it is an unnatural situation to have a foreign military on your soil for a indefinite period of time. And especially given the history of South Korea, you know, maybe if you studied Korean history, you know that originally there were three kingdoms, and eventually Shilla, the one in the southeast, uh, more or less united the peninsula, not entirely, but more or less. But they did so, Shilla did so with the help of China, the Chinese. I'm not sure which Chinese kingdom was in charge at the time, or a Chinese dynasty, but anyway, with the help of China. So after that, the Chinese said, you know what, we like this place, we're going to stay here for a while. And so there was actually another 10 years that the Shilla had to fight China, or at least the Chinese forces on the peninsula in order to get them to leave. And then, of course, end of the 20th century, end of 19th century and into the 20th century, um, Japanese forces came in, and they were here for about 50 years. And then the U.S. forces came in after the Japanese left. U.S. forces came into the south. And in the north, the Soviets and the Chinese did not actually try to station troops in the north. They gave lots of aid. China and Russia both, or Soviet Union both, gave lots of aid. They didn't actually try to establish any bases in the north. And so today there are no Chinese bases or Russian bases in the north, which gave sort of in the mind of many Koreans, gave Kim Il Sung a kind of credibility as being the true patriot or the true nationalist, because he was not relying on foreign militaries, which gave rise, of course, to their Juche ideology, self-reliance. So South Korea always has had this reliance on the U.S., and so the North has always portrayed the South as being a puppet or colony of America, which is not true, but still, the presence of U.S. military in the South sort of kind of gives a small kernel of truth to that accusation. So I anticipate that before long, and perhaps within the 5 years of Lee Jae-myung's administration, uh, there may be a strong effort to remove U.S. forces from the Korean Peninsula. I think that's quite possible, and we'll see what the implications of that are. You North Korea has said that they don't want to unify with the South; they just want to exist as a separate country. But they will find excuses to invade if they want to invade. China also, of course, wants to have uh, South Korea in its sphere of influence. Uh, South Korea is actually a very useful country for them in terms of trade. And South Korea, in the communist government in China actually prefers relations to South Korea over relations to North Korea. I mean, North Korea is what? The problem, right? Come on. For Russia recently, Russia has finally found a use case for North Korea in the Ukraine war. But for China, North Korea is kind of a thorn in their side. But they like South Korea. South Korea is rich. It's got, they buy stuff, um, and their people are able to go there and to South Korea and see some stuff and come back home. It's so, um, but anyway, so we'll see how this develops. But as I said, I think Lee Jae-myung is showing his true colors, but in a under disguise. And I don't know how much the U.S. is able to interpret those intentions. I hope that they are able to do that. I know people who work in the U.S. Embassy in the political section of the U.S. Embassy. They're no dummies, but well, this may pass them by. So I hope it does not. Okay. All right. So that's what's going on here. Let's see. Let's take a look at Newsmax, shall we? Not a whole lot going on today. Actually, in this part of the world, we're going into the lunar autumn festival, lunar autumn full moon festival, right? So in South Korea or in Korea, it's a Chuseok, and in China, it's something else. I don't know how to pronounce it in Chinese yet, but anyway, it's a big holiday in China and Taiwan as well, and I think in many Southeast Asian countries as well. Not in Japan, because Japan has taken that 815 number and moved it onto the solar calendar when they adopted the solar calendar as the official calendar. And so they are not celebrating this now. They already celebrated it back in August. All right, let's see here what is going on here in Newsmax. Of course, the U.S. government is shut down now since yesterday, I guess. So, yeah, since yesterday, and it may be a long one. And Trump is saying that he might take this opportunity to significantly downsize the U.S. government, which might not be a bad idea, except that downsizing the government is fine, but then you have to um, transfer functions to the private sector. So rather than just leaving people in the lurch, because there's a lot of waste, of course, that does not need to be transferred, but some things would be good if they could be transferred. Anyway, the Department of Energy said Wednesday night it is canceling 223 clean energy projects tied to the Biden administration, saving taxpayers more than $7.5 billion. The agency terminated 321 financial awards connected to the projects after a thorough review. According to a press release, the DOE said the projects didn't advance U.S. energy needs, weren't economically viable, and offered no return for taxpayers. Okay, so that sounds good if that's true. And okay, and House Dems remain steadfast amid firing threat. This is the threat from President Trump that he's going to downsize the workforce. Okay. Top House Democrats maintain they won't budge on voting for the GOP-led continuing resolution, even in the face of threats of mass firings by the Trump administration. The Hill reported Wednesday. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries said Democrats are accustomed to the administration's efforts to trim down the federal workforce. The mass firings of federal workers and the Trump administration has been engaging in this since January 20th, Jeffries said in reference to the inauguration. Okay. And this came in reaction to the Office of Management and Budget Director Russell Vought, who said Wednesday the administration would begin firing federal workers in 1 or 2 days. We're going to have to lay some people off if the shutdown continues. Vice President J.D. Vance said Wednesday, we don't like that. We don't necessarily want to do it, but we're going to do what we have to keep the American people's essential services continuing to run. Last week, Vought issued a memo instructing agencies to prepare reduction in force notices for all employees in programs not consistent with the president's priorities. Still, Democrats remain steadfast against voting for the continuing resolution. Okay, and so it's a kind of a show. It's a theater, and um, basically the Democrat leadership, Schumer and others, need to show their base that they're fighting. Yeah, we're really sucking it to him, guys. We're really giving it to Trump. Yeah, and he's hurting. He's really hurting. This is what they need to be able to tell them in order to maintain their support. Otherwise, the base they're not going to become a Republican, but they won't vote. They'll just stay home. You know, it doesn't matter who's in charge. So, but they need to keep people fired up for the election, for the primary or the midterm election next year. So I think that's basically what's going on here. Okay. Anyway, so we'll see what happens with all this. But eventually, when the government comes back, people are going to get paid. They'll get their back pay. So it'll be as if nothing happened. Okay. Speaker shutdown gives Trump keys to the kingdom. All right. Well, how does it do that? The Hill reported that Johnson told a radio host in his home state of Louisiana that the government shutdown ultimately could be a benefit to Trump's overall reduced government spending approach if the White House takes the opportunity to cut federal spending, where Republicans never had the votes in the Senate to do so. Johnson's comments followed a media briefing in Washington where Republican leaders pushed for Democrats to support a short-term funding plan. Okay. All right, so that's what he means. Okay, so then, okay. And let's see here. And U.S. to give Ukraine intel for long-range Russia hits. So that war seems to be escalating further. And uh, one thing, see, I had another story open here. What was it? I don't see it. Let me see if I can find it again. Anyway, so there's a problem now with um, yeah, all the stories have changed as of 7 o'clock. Okay. All right. Okay. Hold on just a second. Here we go. I got it. All right. Here we go. Okay. All right. Yes. This one causes a bit of concern, doesn't it? NATO allies clash after Russian jets breach airspace, testing alliance resolve. Mhm. See what this is about. Recent Russian incursions into NATO airspace have sharpened the divisions inside the alliance over how to respond, exposing both strength and the limits of collective defense. Secretary General Mark Rutte clashed with Estonian Prime Minister last week after Estonia invoked NATO's Article 4 clause, which triggers consultations when a member feels its security is threatened. According to 3 European officials granted anonymity to speak freely, Rutte argued that repeated invocations risk diluting the treaty's force. One source said he even raised his voice at the Estonian Prime Minister, warning that NATO must be cautious about how often it signals alarm. Rutte argued that if Article 4 were invoked every time Russia violated its sovereignty through drone incursions, fighter jets, cyber attacks, and more, it would quickly lose impact, according to the officials. The NATO spokesperson confirmed Rutte and the Estonian Prime Minister spoke Friday and said the Secretary General has supported Estonia throughout the process. And the director of the Government Communication Office of Estonia told Fox News Digital Rutte expressed support for Estonia, and the Prime Minister thanked NATO for its actions. This is why these spokespeople get paid high dollar, right? they they take an all-out fist fight in a closed room, and they come out with, oh yes, each side supported each other. it's I'm sorry, it's just I find it hilarious. Okay, anyway, it's a very serious matter though. Article 4 is just a signal that we're taking note of what happened, said a Lithuanian member of the parliament and former NATO Assistant Secretary General. We can be invoking Article 4 every week, and I think that only weakens us because we're unable to truly respond to that aggression that Russia is sort of throwing at us. Estonia, of course, is one of the Baltic countries. They have the Baltic Sea to one side of their country, and the Russia, of course, surrounds the other. Where they also have a Estonia and Latvia also there, but basically the three countries are bordering Baltic on one side and Russia on the other side, and so they're kind of they are members of NATO, and it's a good thing they are, because if they weren't, they might be suffering something similar to Ukraine right now. The tension comes after a series of provocative moves by Moscow last month. Missile carrying Russian MiG 29s flew into Estonian territory following an earlier breach of Polish airspace by 19 drones and repeated incursions over Romania. In Poland, jets scrambled to intercept the drones, shooting some of them down. It marked the first time since World War II that Polish armed forces mobilized to engage in airborne threat over their homeland. The Russian jets in Estonia were eventually escorted out of the territory by Italian F-35s. Estonia's Article 4 request followed Poland's own invocation days earlier, prompting another round of consultation in Brussels. So they're going to be pretty busy in Brussels, I guess. Since its creation in 1949, Article 4 has been triggered only 9 times. NATO's warning to Russia after the Estonian request was blunt. Any further breaches would be met with all means of defense. Estonia's defense minister said his nation was prepared to shoot down Russian planes violating airspace if there is a need. But this man said signaling without consequences risks leaving the alliance trapped. We're happy to do Article 4 every other day, but so what? What's next? He said. The real question is what happens when the jets actually enter our airspace. The debate cuts to a deeper question: what constitutes a need to shoot down Russian jets? How can Russia be deterred without stumbling into direct war? The last thing we want is to have NATO get drawn into a war with Russia, a senior State Department official told Fox News Digital. God knows how that ends. Almost all wars, they don't necessarily start with a big bang, the official went on. Start with an escalation, and then somebody feels they need to respond to this, and then you just get into a toxic spiral. The United States has promised to defend every inch of NATO while pressing Europe to bear more of its own defense burden. Washington's mixed signals have only complicated matters. Trump administration officials long favored reducing the U.S. troop presence in Europe, but President Donald Trump recently delivered one of the starkest warnings to Moscow, declaring that NATO states should shoot Russian aircraft down if they incur on their territory. And this guy said that the statement resonated across the Baltic states. What was really helpful was that President Trump was very clear. He said, that gives us confidence we're on the right track, and we really appreciate the support. Okay, but that seems to fall right in line with what this NATO official was saying here, or State Department official was saying here. That's escalation leads to toxic spiral. So it looks like we're very close to a toxic spiral in Eastern Europe. Still, allies remain divided on whether to escalate. Some warn that Eastern Europe cannot credibly threaten retaliation without an American security guarantee. Well, yeah, that's true. Others argue that deterrence depends on showing Russia its incursions carry a cost. If we really want to send a proper message of deterrence to Russia, we need to be prepared to use kinetic force. That means neutralizing those jets, shooting them down, or finding other ways to impose consequences so Russia actually feels the cost of its incursions. That hasn't happened yet, and it leaves us vulnerable. And this is the whole point of what Russia is doing and also what China is doing towards Taiwan as well. And not just Taiwan, but also towards the Philippines and the South China Sea, and little by little against Korea as well. There is, a dispute between China and Korea right now, where China has built some sort of structure in the ocean between Korea and China, and Korea says that it actually is in the wrong place. It's in an area of the ocean that is supposed to be controlled by Korea, and Korea has asked China to move it or do something like that, and China has refused. So little by little, they push the envelope, right? And they push the envelope, and each time, whether it's the U.S., whether it's Eastern Europe, whether it's Philippines or Taiwan, there's not much you can do about it. Not a whole lot you can do about it without escalating the situation beyond the point where you want to go, where you get into that toxic spiral that State Department official was talking about. You want to avoid the toxic spiral, but at the same time, as the Estonian people here are saying, if you don't do anything substantive, in other words, if you don't do anything other than just talk, then who cares, right? Does Russia care? No. Does China care? No, it doesn't. And so gradually, what's happening in Taiwan is that gradually, China is moving towards taking over Taiwan without firing a shot, right? Without firing a shot, by wearing down the psyche of the Taiwan people, and also wearing it down on one hand, and on the other hand, sending propaganda towards Taiwan, saying, "Hey, we're not so bad. Uh, we're not so bad, and you can have your freedoms for 50 years." Don't look at Hong Kong. That was not. You don't need to look at Hong Kong. But we promise that you can have your system for 50 years. One state, two systems. We believe in that. The Brits fell for that. Not that they had a choice, I suppose, but uh, anyway, let's not get into the handover of Hong Kong. So the airspace disputes now extend beyond fighter jets. European Union members are meeting in Copenhagen this week to discuss shoring up air defenses after a wave of drone sightings. Denmark briefly shut down its airspace following mysterious drone activity. Lithuania's Vilnius airport and Norway's Oslo airport also reported disruptions. Drones have also been spotted over Germany's northern state of Schleswig-Holstein, let's call it. We are not at war, but we are no longer at peace either. Uh-huh. We must do much more for our own security, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said in Dusseldorf. We are not at war, but we are no longer at peace either. Yeah. NATO jets scrambled to intercept drones over Poland, but the response underscored a growing mismatch, deploying multi-million dollar fighters to counter small unmanned aircraft is neither efficient nor sustainable. NATO remains the most crucial element of our security equation, the Lithuanian man said. It's the backbone through which our security is viewed. There is really no doubt about NATO's political will and its capability to defend its territory. But warfare is changing, and the question now is, has NATO adapted to the new way of war that is seeping through the borders of Ukraine? Ukraine war is changing war in general. That's quite true now. And so North Korea, for example, is saying, "Yeah, let's have a whole bunch of these drones. Yeah, that's a great idea." Yes. And so then the Lithuanian guy warned that neither NATO nor the Baltic states have done enough. The Polish incursion signified that NATO is not fully ready to counter these threats. He said, scrambling jets is a tremendous economic mismatch. If these kinds of attacks become swarms, it's not sustainable. To address mounting threats, NATO last month launched Operation Eastern Sentry, reinforcing its presence in Europe's eastern flank. And Lithuanian guy welcomed the move, but said gaps remain. Jets are very important, but more jets don't mean we're more secure from low altitude drones, he said. Question is, do we have sensors that can detect what's happening from the ground up to a kilometer into our airspace? We don't see that. It's like a dead space. This was also illustrated by the Hamas invasion of Israel in October of 2023. Israel's Iron Dome was not able to capture that invasion because they were not. It wasn't designed for that kind of an invasion. It was designed for missiles that come from Iran or from other or from Lebanon or places like that, and not for these little with what is it, fans attached to them or something, right? Um, so war is changing quickly. In other words, these, what do they call it? Anyway, the, the people with low budgets are figuring out ways to counter the defenses of the countries that have high budgets. And the people with the high budgets haven't yet figured out how to respond to that. So that's a pretty dangerous situation. So Lithuania then called for a stronger short and medium range radar, as well as layered defenses akin to Israel's Iron Dome, capable of intercepting drones with both kinetic and electronic means. NATO's response is commendable, he said, but it's not enough. You need technical know-how, the right capabilities, and systems that are truly integrated if you want to make this work. For now, NATO remains caught between signaling resolve and acting on it as Russia continues to test the alliance borders. The Lithuanian guy and other Eastern European officials warn that credibility is at stake. The next incursion, they accurate, may demand more than words. And I think AI is going to change this situation quite a bit as well. AI can study an enemy's defenses and figure out where the vulnerabilities are, and then recommend new types of weapons or maybe cheaper weapons to go through those vulnerabilities and so forth. And so the possibility of a wider war beyond Ukraine and Europe seems to be growing more and more. In Asia, I think still China's their plan A is still to take over Taiwan without firing a shot through this sort of the psychological pressure plus propaganda, nationalistic propaganda. Yeah, I know, be a part of the mother country, this kind of thing. So we'll see. But Xi Jinping, of course, has set a kind of a deadline for his military to be ready to, not that he's going to, but to be ready to take Taiwan by force in 2027. And when that comes true, when the military is ready, that may be another sort of escalation of the psychological war rather than an actual kinetic war against Taiwan. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see. The cost of a war against Taiwan for communist China would be quite high, not just in human cost, but in terms of international prestige. And what China wants right now is international credibility. That hey, we're the country of peace, right? We're stable, and we're able to keep our population under control, right? We don't have gun violence. We don't have these riots, and if they can say yes, we took over Taiwan, but we did it peacefully. It was the people of Taiwan chose themselves to become a part of the mother country. So, yeah, we did it peacefully. If they can say that, that would actually raise their credibility tremendously on the international stage. So I think that's probably their plan A. But it depends on what Taiwan does. Also depends on what other forces are trying to come up within the Chinese Communist Party. So we'll have to follow these situations, but we shall see. We shall see. And it's dangerous to speculate the future. Um, dangerous. It's actually foolish to try to speculate the future, but we can sometimes tell where things are going. All right, let's see here. What else do we got? Okay, let's take a look at this because it kind of this is let me show you the headline first. The economy is just getting stronger. It's just the US economy, not weaker. And we in the economic profession need to look ourselves in the mirror, top analyst says. So it's an interesting point of view. Everybody's talking about how the dollar is collapsing and this, that, and the other. But this man says that actually, that the economy is getting better. And what was it? The second quarter GDP was revised to, was it 3.8%? Well, yeah, that was the second quarter. Yeah, over, yeah. One of Wall Street's most closely watched voices delivered a blunt message to peers and policymakers. The U.S. economy is not faltering; it's accelerating. Torsten Slok, I guess you pronounce it, economist at Apollo Global Management, said forecasts of an imminent slowdown have been repeatedly wrong. And that's true. I've been talking about a possible sort of a recession since what? Beginning of last year, I think. It's been almost 2 years. And the economic profession should start grappling with its track record of misjudgments. All right. The consensus has been wrong since January. Well, what happened in January? Trump's inauguration. So ever since Trump's inauguration, economists have been saying doom and gloom, doom and gloom. But this guy is saying, hey, you know what? It hasn't happened. This guy said in a note circulated to clients Wednesday morning, adding that the average of economists' forecast has said the economy would slow down for 9 months running. But the reality is that it has simply not happened. We in the economic profession need to look ourselves in the mirror. The second quarter GDP expanded at a rate of 3.8% annualized rate, a strikingly strong pace given the Federal Reserve's ongoing effort to tamp down inflation. The Atlanta Fed's GDP Now model suggests growth may be even stronger in the third quarter, forecasting 3.9% gains. Many economists had expected the lagging impact of high interest rates, tighter credit conditions, and April's Liberation Day market shock to drag growth meaningfully lower by now. Instead, the data tells a different story. Consumer spending has continued to prove resilient, and business investment, far from retreating, has strengthened in sectors tied to artificial intelligence, energy infrastructure, and manufacturing reshoring. Housing, often sensitive to interest rates, has shown surprising stability in key regional markets. Slok did not dive into these particulars in Wednesday's edition of his Daily Spark. They expect to address slowing job growth. This is the result of slowing immigration, he wrote, not economic weakness. That's interesting. Slowing immigration. Well, now, actually, I think yesterday, something like 100,000 federal workers actually left their jobs. They had resigned earlier in the year, but saying that they would work until the end of September. So now we have 100,000 former government officials or government employees out looking for jobs, it seems. And so that may affect the jobs situation. The bottom line is that the U.S. economy remains remarkably resilient, Slok emphasized. It's becoming increasingly difficult to argue that we are still waiting for the delayed negative effects of what happened 6 months ago, referring to President Trump's Liberation Day and the imposition of sweeping reciprocal tariffs. One top analyst has been arguing for years that most of Wall Street was wrong and that Liberation Day represented the end of the beginning rather than the beginning of the end. So Morgan Stanley's chief U.S. equity strategist, Mike Wilson, has coined a phrase to describe what's been happening in the economy for roughly 3 years. That's a rolling recession. The economy has been quietly weathering recession-like conditions since sometime in 2022, Wilson argued throughout, with the recession not being picked up by conventional measurements, but rather rolling through different segments of the economy one at a time. Wilson contends headline figures such as GDP and unemployment missed serious underlying struggles, including an 80% collapse in hiring over the summer and persistently negative median earnings growth. That could be true. Could be true. Yes, because I know, but there is a kind of a problem saying that the economy is doing great because I wasn't sharing that with you, was I? I'm sorry. There is a problem with saying that the economy is doing great because a lot of people are really having trouble. So this rolling recession idea may not be far off the mark. Um, the data says that things have been going great, especially the GDP data seems to be fantastic, right? 3.4 or 3.8%. I'm sorry. I guess the quarter before that was 3.4, wasn't it? Or no, the first quarter was bad. First quarter was down a bit, wasn't it? It was something like negative something, 0.4, something like that. And then the second quarter came back now revised to 3.8. And now the third quarter, which ended just a couple of days ago, 3.9. We'll be getting the first estimate on the third quarter GDP at the end of this month, and we'll have to see what that's like. But when you look at individuals, people are having difficulty. We know we've seen a lot of stories about that. Right? Okay, let's see. Let's look at the Epic Times for a chance here. Um, California mask ban puts federal agents and families on edge. Right? Yeah, they don't want ICE wearing masks. Bondi deploys Justice Department agents to ICE facilities after Dallas attack. Mhm. And lawmakers push to end discriminatory college pricing. This is interesting. How does different people have to pay different high prices? And we know about in-state and out-of-state tuition, but higher education institutions hire consultants who implement yield management tactics similar to those used by the hotel and airline industry. Yikes, that doesn't sound very good. Two high school seniors with a B plus average and similar extracurricular activities get accepted to the same four-year private college. Their household incomes are nearly identical. One would pay $29,700 a year to attend the school, while the other would pay $51,000. What gives? Mysteries like this have plagued American families for decades. Well, I wasn't aware of this. Okay. I always assumed that you had in-state and out-of-state tuition difference, of course, but this is something very new for me. But apparently, it's been going on for decades. Um, Schools that don't have large endowments set their sticker prices high and then provide students tens of thousands of dollars in quote scholarships unquote to make them feel valued, even though that net price is still well above the break-even price. It might be far more than what another student is paying. It's just remarkable to see how the whole industry knows this is happening. Everybody knows but the students and parents. The ethical implications of these things to see them demonstrated by consultants are jaw-dropping. Some of the more competitive colleges and universities, which do have large endowments, also gain access to families' financial information and other colleges of interest before they determine a student's likelihood to attend and how much of a discount is needed to entice them. Interesting. At the top end colleges, the level of the price discrimination that they engage in is shocking. Hmm. Hmm. I'm shocked, shocked. I put two kids through college in the United States, and I certainly did not know about this. All right. But I guess that was not, they were not private schools though. That was those were state schools. All right. Let's see if we can grab one more before we have to go. All right. Government showdown begins. Okay. Senate rejects funding plan to reopen government. Okay. I guess not. All right. So that's it for today. All right. Thank you for being with me, and I'll see you tomorrow. God bless, Godspeed. May His kingdom come quickly.